I just got done shooting the episode that we're fixing the watch. Man, it turned out so good. I just want to give you a little sneak preview here, y'all. I am loving, loving, loving how this turned out. Here's what I'm thinking for this episode. Let's get these towers cut down, the bay bars in, all the cross braces and stuff done for that, and get the shock mounts on this car. All right, let's get busy. When it comes to building these cars, the hardest thing to me seems to be knowing where to start to keep from making some big error that bites me later when I realize like, oh, that's not gonna work, and I have to start undoing stuff. Well, for what we're doing today, the starting point is definitely the right front shock. We have got to figure this out, and then everything else flows from that. Now notice this is just a cheap throwaway non-rebuildable shock. I keep a couple of these around just for building, to weld around, you know, that kind of stuff. All of my 15 series BSB manufacturing shocks have been sent back to Mr. J. Neal with BSB manufacturing. So we're going through them. He's going to check them, dyno them, put oil, do everything. But then also we're looking at them as far as changing valving. And then those 15 series, you can do base valves on them. You can do SRT pistons on them. If you do both of those, they call that the Elite series. And those are modifications that can take an already great shock and make it be able to perform a lot better on more different types of track conditions and stuff. And so Mr. J and I talked, and he says, you know, I think like your next step in your game for like how to make your car work better for you, because like we're traveling to all these different tracks and stuff, definitely going to do some modifications and upgrades. When we get those back, Mr. J will walk through everything we've done and stuff, and then we'll cover that when we put the shocks on. But just want to let you know what's going on here. We won't be going to the track with this one, y'all. We will have our 15 series back before we start. All right, let me show you these shock mounts right quick. Now, all the mounts for this car were sponsored by Keith Whitmire. Keith, thank you for that. On the bottom here, we used the flat mount, and then on the top, we're using the tubular style mount right here. One other difference you're gonna notice, we'll talk about it more as we go through the build. The way we bought all of these is with 2 mount holes for the top. And you see this right front I have cut down right here. That has to do with how that there's gonna be different shock links left to right. As we go through the build, it's gonna make sense why I cut this down. I'll talk about it more. So, let's get busy and we go. It's real simple to figure out on this lower because he's got a real big pad right here for us to mount it to. So that's going to go right there on that pad. And this is going to be up here. And the tube is going to go right across the center of this tower. So first thing we got to do is figure out where does this tube need to be with this fully compressed and this right front all the way up. So the critical element for this is that we don't ruin the shock. The shock's going to cost more than every other piece on this right front. And so we really don't want to crush the upper control arm into the body of the shock and ruin the shock. That's a bad day. And so I'm all the way up, and you can see that. All the way, I'm literally bottomed out right here. And then I have got the shock, and that's the reason that I took and figured out what that maximum compressed length is for that 15 series shock. Now, am I ever going to get to this point? Not running the car in normal conditions, but we do need to clearance the shock for this because there's a couple of things here to keep in mind. When we're fully compressed and down like this, if a car comes in and say, for example, hits us in that left rear and gets under the left rear, it kind of can just stand the car instantly up on the right front. And so if we're already all the way down, so if we're within an inch or two of this location, for example, and somebody catches us in that left rear, it's going here. That is where it's going to go. But what we're doing here is I am just taking and mounting that there. And I'm looking, I put a jack bolt in and turned it up to make sure I didn't put the shock right over the top of the jack bolt, you know, because the two can't conflict. And I am just going to take and I'm going to back this thing up to where I'm not on my upper ball joint. I'll put like a 1/4 inch here between them. And it could still contact it. Y'all, you're very liable to contact it, end up running a tube on shock. If you're in, rebuildable shocks, You can like replace tubes, you know, have them repaired and stuff, but you just want to avoid that if possible. You know, you don't want to be at the track and have all this stuff tore up. So what I'm doing here is I'm just coming up to about a 1/4 inch off of it. I got this thing fully maxed out, and I'm going to take my marker and I'm going to mark. That would be where that tube's at. All right, let me show you maximum travel, what we're doing here. So like I got the shock out, and I'm going to measure to that line we marked. And it's 16 inches from the pad to that line right there where we're going to cut this tower off. And now I'm going to drop this down, and I put a couple wood blocks under here that are 1 inch below level, which is never going to be in its normal running conditions. It's not even going to get to that, but I'm trying to make sure I've got plenty of range. So like I drop this down, the lower control arm is on the bottom down an extra inch, and then I'm going to measure this again. And so I was 16, that's 21.5. So the important takeaway right here is that I have got tons of range. So I can go from all the way maxed to, you know, 1 inch past where I think it's ever going to go to, and it's only 5.5 inches, and that's on a 7-inch stroke shock. Now that we've got our mark, let's start thinking about cutting that tower off. How are we going to do that? All right, so this is the point right here that I actually want to cut off. I'm going to mark 1.5 inches above it because we're going to use 1.5 inch tube. Okay, so I'm going to mark it. I've got this mark 1.5 inches high, and the reason I've got this 1.5 inches high here is because I am going to take and lay a level on top of this tube right here. So a tube that's connected in here would be connected in that 1.5 inches below right there. And so that's the reason for the mark 1.5 inches up. Now, the reason I did it like this, I want it to be one plane. I don't want this to be level here and then have a break and angle up, you know, or be up here and then break and angle down. I want it to be one plane all the way through because I want to be able to transfer any impact load that's trying to fold the front of the clip up. I want to transfer that through into my cage. That I do. At the same time, I still want to be able to twist and roll. I want the frame to have some forgiveness in it so that, you know, as I'm running that right front, I can get some twist in the frame. It's going to make the car work better. And having this all one line like that, it's going to make it very stiff as far as the front clip being pushed up or down, but it's not going to hurt it torsionally as far as twisting. It'll still twist, but it's going to be real rigid as far as folding up. And so that's why I decided on this. So I'm just going to take and transfer these marks right here where that we can cut this off and get this first tube in. Let's see what the actual angle is. 7.8 degrees. Like I said, the important point is to get it exactly where I need it for the shock mount and stuff. It's got to work for the car, but let me make sure that that clears my header right here. Yep, that works fine. That clears my header. And I tell you, another thing that I was considering here, y'all, I didn't want to run this level for another reason. I did not want to have a bay bar tube up against this header, like right against it. And because I don't know if y'all run into this on cars before, but if you've got your roll cage close to, within 1/4 inch of your headers anywhere, very difficult to get headers in and out because you have to be able to get away from that head, you know, and then you've got your spark plugs and everything, and like you may have a header that maybe you got a leak and you need to change a gasket or something, but because of like where your bars are and stuff, you got to pull spark plugs out, or you have to take the starter off, or you have to lift the engine up. It's like, if you can avoid that, avoid that. Seriously, pain in the tail. So yeah, so we're going to make sure we're up here. We're going to do the same thing. When this tube comes through here, we're going to bend that tube. You'll see. All right, I got it cut off here. Let me see if I can maybe use a couple magnets to help make the tube sit up there. We'll mock this up. Just got a piece of tube. right here. If I slide that all the way back, let's see. Yep, straight into the cage. So I got the angle right. So let me see if I can slide it forward enough that it'll just sit there on its own. So if I was to take and just say, well, I want it to go straight down. Well, that's at 8 degrees. So like, yeah, if I set that on 82 degrees, I bet you money right there, that would be straight up and down. I don't want that, because then this nose, if this did get pushed up, this nose right here, like you're more into it just like folding up. And don't get me wrong, this plate right here adds a ton of strength, like that bridge element, you know, by having the U right there and it's real wide and spreading that out. That's a lot right there, just that tower's creating. But we want some angle here so that it's pushing into the tube, not folding under the tube. And let's look and see what 45 degrees looks like. So there's 45. I want to be right into this corner right here. So I got a 45 cheater. Hang on. Yeah, so here's a 45 right here. So like that would come in, and it would actually end up, that tube bend would be right in there, and then that way that would go right into this, where this wide section is. That would work great. And then that, where that elbow is right there, I could put me a tie-off point or something where that, like radiator support, you know, nose, whatever, like tie into that corner right there. Shoot, that's gonna work good. And as far as like where to bend it, this is getting cut off. Like I've got an extra 12 inches hanging out here, so I'm just using an extra little bit long piece. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side, but I'm gonna bend it with some extra here. That way I can just trim it until it sits right down where I want it, and you know, weld it up and then turn around and I'll cut the back off, because it's gonna join up. It's gonna be a node right here where all this joins up. So not a big deal, let's bend this up. So I'm gonna try to make sure I just kind of creep up on this cutting, not just make one big cut and end up short. So I'm gonna take and kind of pull that back. I want to be right there above that idler arm. I'm going to just trim that joker and trim and see and trim and see and get her right in there. All right, the next piece I'm going to do here is going to be this tube that goes right through here. Now you can see this header is in the way, so I can't go straight up underneath this. Now I don't want to be against the header either. And then also on the bottom here, I'm actually standing in front of like this edge of the frame right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take an S-bended piece of tube. Tube doesn't have to be perfectly straight or whatever. I want the center of the tube to be straight up and down. But I'm going to turn it in here, and I'm going to turn it out there, trim it up to fit. It's going to be beautiful, y'all. So let's get that done. I had a scrap piece with a 90 already in one end. I put a little 18-degree bend right there. Got a little mouth on it here. We'll see if we can find a spot where it just fits right in there in between them tubes, and that plate can tie onto it. Got that out of the way. Now I can just mount this tube right in that center where I need it. Let's see. We are pretty well there. I just need to trim the bottom to fit up in this little cubby hole right here. I think I can do that. Let's kind of trim out of the way, and we're going to stick this sucker in there. Okay, so we got that one in. See how I did that little turn right there? That's what it needed, y'all. Just trimmed out, throw it back in there, and see if that'll fit. Maybe it'll fit. All right, so I'm gonna drop back 1 inch from where this tube was, right here. I'm gonna make me a mark. The reason I'm gonna put it off, I'm gonna put a cap right here. We'll kind of have a tie point right here, because we've got two tubes that are gonna come into it. Make it a lot easier for us to deal with. All right, I got my tube ready to go here. Got my big 1 3/4 plug right here on the end welded up. Gives me something really big and beefy to weld onto. Okay, we got this. Let's go ahead and put the shock on. I'm going to do this side, the shock, and then we'll do the other side and the shock, and then we'll do the W in the middle. Let's see how close we were. Maybe we were close. Maybe we were close. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So right now this is turned at an angle to my shock. So I am going to take these gloves off where I can get in here and deal with this. We're going to do a little bit of clearancing. I am going to take and clearance out this side where I can twist this to get it in line with the shock, where my heim's not running all the way cocked over one way. Make sure, yep, I got my clearance. There. Looks good. That should clear just fine. Let's check it right quick. Oh, you get in there, you'll be all right. There we go. Yep. Y'all, I'm really liking how this turned out as far as the shape of it, the way it looks. It just makes sense. Loving this. If you like it, thumbs up right here. I'm going to do the left side off camera, but don't run off, because what we'll do is I'll cover it after I get it together and everything. We'll go over it, and then in this video we've got some W tubes we're going to put in, and let's figure out how to do this front engine bay bar that goes across in front of the engine. Let's get that knocked down this episode before we quit. Well, I've got the left side tubes on here. The front tube right here, all of this is identical. I just matched it up the whole way. Little bit different shape right here. I don't have that rail tube coming in that I could tie into, so I just bent it on over and then came back so that I could tie it straight into the frame. Otherwise, it's exactly the same there. The angle of this tube tying on is slightly different because the cage sits out at the edge on this side to create the most driver's compartment room. So I get a little bit different angle right here, but otherwise it's identical to the other side. They're both sitting equidistantly the same because I was able to set my towers exactly the same side to side. I wanted to talk about how this left front is going to mount compared to the right front. It is going to be different. So on the right side, it was all about making sure that we didn't bottom the shock out. On the left side, it's all about making sure we don't top the shock out. And so I have got this lower control arm sitting 2 inches below level. All right, so I dropped it down, put some wood blocks in until I was like 2 inches down. The reason I did that is I want to make sure that when I mount it right here, that I can do that 2 inches down and get it mounted up. And that represents like the maximum, extension I'm going to see. I'm going to be running a chain where I'm not going to let this thing drop further than that for sure. And matter of fact, what I'll do is I'll make sure that the chain itself always catches before the shock. That way we're not constantly topping the shock out, creating damage inside of this assembly. We don't want to do that. I'm not as worried about bottoming it out where we shove it all the way in, because like the right side is always going to be compressed. And so we're always within a few inches of like bottoming that shock out. So we want to make sure that we've got it where it's clearanced and we've got other things that are going to catch, like the lower control arm on the frame, before it does it. On this left side, we're going to be in this, 1 inch of extension, 1 inch of compression. We're going to be in this range on this left side. So there's not near as much risk on this side of doing that. So we don't want to constantly be topping the shock out, and picking that left front up. And that's going to create a weight transfer that we don't necessarily want to do. We want to use a chain to adjust that instead. So just made sure, and that's the reason that I left that second hole there. So this is a little bit taller on this side. And I'm just going to mount it up. I'm going to do a little bit of trimming. And I'm going to weld it up and make sure it clears the jack bolt, or I can get a socket down on that, and everybody will be happy. And we're going to weld this joker on. Get a little trimming on this thing. Good spot right there. Sandy check. Alignment. That's definitely lined up. That's decently lined up. Yep. Yep. That's welded up. I got some 1.25" here. We're gonna put the W in. That's what I call it, because like it makes a W. But this is, I like this design here, and this is what I'm gonna do. I did an X on my other car, but I realized that it was just overkill. And 2 triangles like this, perfect, it's all it needs. So that's what we're gonna do. Let me get this spotted in here right quick. So I'm going to the center of the frame. Not the center of this bar right here, but the center of the frame itself is where I'm going to. All right, I got my other tube here ready to go. Splits that middle, goes to the same spot over here. I want to put a cross strut in here to support these 2 sides. If I get in a wreck over here, I don't want to push this in. I want to just tear up the stuff out here that's bolted to it. And y'all gonna think I'm crazy when you see where I put this, but it just works out. And it's gonna be really, really slick. So y'all just remember 29 3/4 inches is what we're doing here. 29 3/4 inches. Wait a minute, y'all are watching this later. I've got to remember 29 3/4 inches. Anyway, let's get it cut. All right, so you see I got a bolt, a nut, putting a washer right here. There's a method to my madness, I promise you. We can get this to all come out. It might come out right. All right. That's not terrible. Got to do a little cleanup on it. Clean it off a little bit. That down there. Sit that there. I think I can do that. I think I can do that. So let me get you. There, right there. Hold my mouth right. Go. Alright. That side's ready. Get that measurement. Look how thick that is. That washer. 1/16 of an inch. So let's see. What was it? 29 3/4, right? We're over just a hair. Need to gear down just a little bit. Here, trim down there. All right. All right, let's see how we did. The moment of truth. Oh, that's money right there. Let's go throw it on there. See how that works. Yeah, buddy. Tight, and it just, boy, it lined up perfect. That's a good sign. I think she's right there. I got her drilled. Put the bolt in here. There's that one. Oh man, I'm loving that. All right, I gotta admit, that's the easiest cross strut I have ever built in my life putting a car. Like no extra gadgets or things or... Jamie, hey, on your water jet, put a hole right there. You'll be money ahead, put a hole right there. I'm telling you. I'm quitting. It's been a long day, y'all. I said today I wanted to get this entire front done. You know, shock mounts done, everything. Because, like I need to get to brakes and steering and all of that. And because it's just crunch, crunch, crunch. And got there. It's late. I ain't gonna lie. It's late, y'all. But I am loving how this part turned out. I'm tickled. I'm tickled with it. Let me know. Leave me a comment. What do you think, y'all? And by all means, be subscribed because this build, man, we're moving fast. And I will see you next time.